This is Kris Clark, and I have the pleasure of reading for you today. I'm going to be reading part 1 of the chapter 5 Gorillas. 5 Gorillas is from Travels in West Africa, a book published in 1897, written by Mary Kingsley. Again, this is part 1 of 5 Gorillas. I will not bore you with my diary in detail regarding our land journey, because the water-washed little volume attributive to this period is mainly full of reports of law cases, for reasons hereinafter to be stated, and at night when passing through this bit of country, I was usually too tired to do anything more than make an entry such as 5S, 4RA, NE, Ebony, TI, 50, etc., etc. Entries that require amplification to explain their significance, and I will proceed to explain. Our first day's march was a very long one. Path, in the ordinary acceptance of the term, there was none. Hour after hour, mile after mile, we passed on in the undergloom of the great forest. The pace made by the Fans, who are infinitely the most rapid Africans I have ever come across, severely tired the Ajamba, who are canoemen, and who have been as fresh as paint after their exceedingly long days paddling from Avrumba to Mafeta. Naguda, the interpreter, felt pumped and said as much very early in the day. I regretted very much having brought him, for from a mixture of nervous exhaustion arising from our Mafeta experiences and a touch of chill, he had almost entirely lost his voice, and I feared would fall sick. The Fans were evidently quite at home in the forest and strode on over fallen trees and rocks with an easy, graceful stride. What saved us weaklings was the Fans' appetites. Every 2 hours they sat down and had a snack of a pound or so of meat and a guma apiece, followed by a pipe of tobacco. We used to come up with them at these halts. Naguta and the Ajamba used to sit down and rest with them, and I also for a few minutes for a rest and a chat. But then I would go on alone, thus getting a good start. I got a good start, in the other meaning of the word, on the afternoon of the first day when descending into a ravine. I saw in the bottom, wading and rolling in the mud, a herd of 5 elephants. I am certain that owing to some misapprehension among the fates, I was given a series of magnificent sporting chances intended as a special treat for those favorite Nimrod of the 3 ladies, and I know exactly how I ought to have behaved. I should have felt my favorite rifle fly to my shoulder, and then, carefully sighting for the finest specimen, have fired. The noble beast should have stumbled forward, recovered itself, and shedding its lifeblood behind it, have crashed away into the forest. I should then have had tracked it, and either with one well-directed shot have given it its quietus, or have been charged by it, the elephant passing completely over my prostrate body. Either termination is good form, but I never have these things happen, and never will. In the present case, I remembered hastily that your one chance when charged by several elephants is to dodge them round trees, working downwind all the time until they lose smell and sight of you, then to lie quiet for a time and go home. It was evident from the utter unconcern of these monsters that I was downwind now, so I had only to attend to dodging, and I promptly dodged round a tree, thinking perhaps a dodge in time saves 9, and I lay down. Seeing they still displayed no emotion on my account, and fascinated by the novelty of the scene, I crept forward from one tree to another until I was close enough to have hit the nearest one with a stone, and spats of blood, which they sent flying over their stamping and wallowing, came flap, flap among the bushes, covering me. One big fellow had a nice pair of 40-pound or so tusks on him, singularly straight, and another had one big tusk, curved tusk, and one broken one. If I were an elephant, I think I would wear the tusks straight. They must be more effective weapons thus, but there seems no fixed fashion among elephants here in this matter. Some of them lay right down like pigs in the deeper part of the swamp. Some drew up trunkfuls of water and syringed themselves in each other, and every one of them indulged in a good rub against a tree. Presently, when they had enough of it, They all strolled off upwind, the way elephants have, but why I do not know, because they know the difference, always carrying their trunk differently when they are going upwind to what they do when they are going down. Arrested mental development, I suppose. They strolled through the bush in Indian file, now and then breaking off a branch, but leaving singularly little dead water for their tonnage and breadth of beam. One laid his trunk affectionately on the back of the other, of the one in front of him, which I believe to be the elephant equivalent of walking arm in arm. When they had gone, I rose up, turned round to find the men, and trod on Kiva's back then and there, full and fair, and fell sideways down the steep hillside until I fetched up among some roots. It seems Kiva had come on, after his meal, before the others, and seeing the elephants, and being a born hunter, had crawled like me down to look at them. He had not expected to find me there, he said. I do not believe he gave a thought of any sort of me in the presence of these fascinating creatures, and so he got himself trotted on. I suggested to him that we should pile the baggage and go and have an elephant hunt. He shook his head reluctantly, saying, "Cor, cor," like a depressed rook, and explained we were not strong enough. There were only 3 fans, the Ajamba and Naguda didn't count, and moreover, that we had not brought sufficient ammunition, owing to the baggage having to be carried. And the ammunition that we did have must be saved for other game than elephant, for we might meet war before we met the Zimbabwe River. We had now joined the rest of the party, and were all soon squattering about on our own account in the elephant bath. It was shocking bad going, like a plowed field exaggerated by a terrific nightmare. It pretty nearly pulled all the legs off me, and to this hour I cannot tell you if it is best to put your foot into the footmark, a young pond I mean, about the size of the bottom of a Madeira work armchair, or whether you should poise yourself on the rim of the same and stride forward to its other bank, boldly and hopefully. The footmarks in the places where the elephants had been rolling were by now filled with water, and the mud underneath was in places hard and slippery. In spite of my determination to preserve an awesome and unmoved calm while among these dangerous savages, I had to give way and laugh explosively. To see the portly, powerful pagan suddenly convert himself into a quadruped, while Grayshirt poised himself on one heel and waved his other leg in the air to advertise to the assembled nations that he was about to sit down, was irresistible. No one made such palaver about taking a seat as Grayshirt. I did it repeatedly without any fuss to speak of. That lordly elephant hunter, the great Kiwi, would, I fancy, have strode over safely and with dignity, but the man who was in front of him spun round on his own axis and flung his arms around the fan, and they went to the earth together. The heavy load of Kiwi's back drove them into the mud like a pile driver. However, we got through in time, and after I'd got up the other side of the ravine, I saw the fan let the Ajamba go on and were busy searching themselves for something. I followed the Ajamba, and before I joined them, felt a fearful prickling irritation. Investigation of the affected part showed a tick of terrific size with its head embedded in the flesh. Pursuing this interesting subject, I found 3 more and had awfully hard work to get them off, and painful too, for they give one not only a feeling of irritation at their holding on place, but a streak of rheumatic feeling pain up from it. On completing operations, I went on and came upon the Ajamba in a state more approved of by Praxiteles than by the general public nowadays. They had found out about the elephant ticks, so I went on and got an excellent start for the next stage. By this time, shortly after noon on the first day, we had struck into a mountainous and rocky country and also struck a track you had to keep your eye on or you lost it in a minute, but still a guide as to direction. The forest trees here were mainly ebony and a great hardwood trees, with no palms, save my old enemy, the climbing palm, calamus, as usual, going on its long excursions up one tree and down another, bursting into a flume of fronds, and in the middle of each plume, one long spike sticking straight up, which was an unopened frond, whenever it got a gleam of sunshine, running along the ground over anything it meets, rock or fallen timber, all alike. Its long, dark-colored, rope-like stem, simply furred with thorns. Immense must be the length of some of these climbing palms. One tree I noticed that day that had hanging from its summit, a good 150 feet above us, a long, straight, rope-like palm stem. Interested, I went to it and tried to track it to its root, and found it was only a loop that came down from another tree. I had no time to trace it further, for they go up the tree and travel along the surrounding tree tops, take an occasional dip, and then up again. The character of the whole forest was very interesting. Sometimes for hours we passed among thousands upon thousands of great white columns of uniform height, about 100 to 150 feet. At the top of these, the boughs branched out and interlaced among each other, forming a canopy or ceiling which dimmed the light, even repetition of the equatorial sun, to such an extent that no undergrowth could thrive in the gloom. The statement of the struggle for existence was published here in plain figures, but it was not, as in our climate, a struggle against climate mainly, but an internecine war with overpopulation. Now and again we passed among vast stems of buttressed trees, sometimes enormous in girth, and from their faraway summits hung great bush ropes, some as straight as plumb lines, others coiled round and intertwined among each other, until one could fancy one was looking on to some mighty battle between armies of gigantic serpents that had been arrested at its height by some magic spell. All these bush ropes were as bare of foliage as a ship's wire rigging, but a good many had thorns. I was very curious as to how they got up straight, and investigation showed me that many of them were carried up with a growing tree. The only true climbers were the calamus and the rubber vine, both of which employ hook tackle. Some stretches of this forest were made up of thin, spindly stemmed trees of great height. Among these stretches, I always noticed the ruins of some forest giant, whose death by lightning, or by his superior height, having given the demonic tornado wind an extra grip on him, had allowed sunlight to penetrate the lower regions of the forest, and then evidently the seedlings and saplings, who had for years been living a half-starved life for light, shot up. They seemed to know that their one chance lay in getting with the greatest rapidity to the level of the top of the forest. No time to grow fat in the stem, no time to send out side branches or any of those vanities. Up to the light level, and he among them who reached it first won in this game of life and death. For when he gets there, he spreads out his crown of upper branches and shuts off the light-giving sunshine from his competitors, who pale off and die, or remain dragged on in existence, waiting for another chance, and waiting sometimes for centuries. There must be tens of thousands of seeds which perish before they get their chance. But the way the seeds of the hardwood African trees are packed, as it were, in cases specifically made durable, it is very wonderful. Indeed, the ways of Providence here are wonderful in their strange dual intent to preserve and to destroy. But on the whole, as Peer Gynt truly observes, ein guter Wirt, nein das ist nur nicht, which means, a good host, know that he is not.